If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Surely in life, each of us has felt small and helpless before the towering mountains of difficulties and challenges. This could be an illness, a broken relationship, a financial burden, or simply the fear and doubt within our own souls. In those moments, the teaching of Jesus echoes, comforting us warmly and intimately. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. The Lord does not demand a huge, great faith from the start. He only needs a faith as small as a mustard seed, one of the smallest kinds of seeds, but one that is genuine and alive. He wants us to understand that strength lies not in the size of our faith, but in the one in whom we place our trust. That mustard seed, though small, contains a vibrant life, with the potential to grow into a large tree for the birds of the air to shelter in. Likewise, sincere faith, though it begins humbly, is a life-giving seed that has the power to connect us with the infinite power of God. It is not a self-sufficient power to level everything, but an act of entrustment, an invitation for God to act in our lives, turning the impossible into the possible. Therefore, do not be quick to despair when you see that your faith is still young and weak. Continue to sow that tiny mustard seed through prayer, trust, and hope. Because when I'm placed in His providential hands, miracles will begin. As Mother Teresa of Calcutta once said, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love." From that simple yet warm teaching, let us delve deeper into the treasure of wisdom that Jesus left behind. Like a meticulous jeweler polishing a rough gem, we will discover the sparkling facets of faith, to see that the teaching about the mustard seed and the mountain is not just a poetic image, but a profound guide for every journey in life. Below are the philosophies drawn from that teaching, each one a step that brings us closer to the truth and power hidden behind faith. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now we invite you to listen. 1. Strength lies not in present size, but in the living potential within. A mustard seed is tiny, but it contains life and the promise of a great tree. A rock may be larger, but it is dead and will never grow. God does not look at your visible greatness. He looks at the seed of faith, however small, that quietly exists within you. Along the dusty road to Jericho, the Apostle Thomas bent down and picked up a pebble, saying, "Teacher, sometimes I feel my faith is just like this pebble, barren and useless." Jesus smiled, picked up a mustard seed from the roadside, and placed it in Thomas's palm next to the pebble. He said, "Thomas, this pebble will always be a pebble, but this mustard seed, though smaller, carries a whole forest within it. Do not look at the size, but at the life my Father has breathed into it. Your faith is the same. Let it live, and it will do wonders." 2. The biggest mountain often lies within our own minds. Before we can move a physical mountain, we must move the mountain of doubt, fear, and self-imposed limitations. The Lord's teaching is a call to conquer the inner enemy first. When the mind is freed from the chains of impossibility, the outside world will begin to change. A woman who had been tormented by illness for many years approached Jesus weeping, "Teacher, this mountain of sickness is crushing me. I cannot move it." Jesus looked deep into her eyes and asked, "Before we talk about the mountain before you, Tell me about the mountain in your heart. Is it the mountain of despair? Tell that mountain of despair, get away from me. And you will see that the mountain of sickness is no longer so fearsome. 3. Faith is a verb, not a static noun. Faith is not something you possess, but something you practice. The teaching says, you will say to this mountain. The act of saying, a concrete action stemming from belief, is the catalyst. Faith only becomes alive when it is expressed through words, actions, and choices. In a noisy market, Peter asked the Lord, "Teacher, how do I know if my faith is strong enough?" Jesus pointed to a potter shaping clay and said, "Peter, look, the potter has faith that this lump of clay will become a pot, but that faith is meaningless if he doesn't start kneading it. Your faith is the same. Don't sit around measuring it. Stand up and speak to your mountain. That very act will prove your faith." 4. Faith is not human strength, but the key that unlocks God's power. The mustard seed does not move the mountain by itself. It is a symbol of connection. Our small faith is like inserting a tiny key into the lock of a giant door. The key doesn't have the strength to break down the door, but it opens the way for an infinite power to pass through. The apostles were in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and a light wind was blowing. Jesus asked John, "John, whose strength moves this boat, the rowers or the winds?" John replied, "The winds, teacher." Jesus nodded, "Your faith is like the sail. By itself it has no power, but when it is raised, it catches the mighty wind of my Father to carry the boat of your life across all great waves." 5. Sincerity is more important than perfection. Jesus did not ask for a perfect, flawless faith. He only needs a sincere faith, even if it is trembling and full of imperfections. A real mustard seed is more precious than a mountain of fake gold. Sincerity of heart is the only soil where God plants miracles. A tax collector named Matthew came to Jesus with a sense of guilt. He said, "Lord, my faith is impure, unclean. How can I dare to ask for anything?" Jesus replied, "Matthew, people use clean water to wash away dirt. No one waits for the dirt to disappear before using water. Do not wait for your faith to be perfect before coming to me. Just bring all your imperfections here. Your sincerity is the purest water." 6. Faith is the starting point, not the destination. You don't need to have mountain-moving faith to begin. You just need faith as small as a mustard seed to start. The journey of living with that mustard seed will nurture its growth day by day. Don't wait for a feeling of great faith. Act with the small faith you have now. A young man wanted to follow Jesus, but hesitated. "What must I do to have great faith like yours?" Jesus pointed to the path ahead and said, "You don't need to see the end of the road to dare to take the first step. You only need enough light for that first step. Faith as a mustard seed is the light for that step. Just go, and you will see." 7. The surrounding environment can either nurture or stifle the mustard seed of faith. A mustard seed needs good soil, water, and light to sprout. So does our faith. It needs to be nourished by prayer, water, by meditating on God's word, light, and by fellowship with fellow believers, good soil. Be mindful to protect and cultivate this precious seed. When the disciples asked why they sometimes felt weak, Jesus took them to a garden and showed them 2 trees. One was green and lush, the other was stunted and withered. He said, both seeds were equally good at the start, but one tree was cared for and watered, while the other was left among rocks and weeds. Your faith is also a seed. Where are you placing it? Among complaints and fears, or amidst prayer and hope? Power is not reserved for anyone. It is for anyone who believes. Jesus did not say, "If the apostles have faith," but he said, "If you have faith." This promise is universal. It is not for a special, holy, or talented group of people. It is for every soul, regardless of past, status, or ability, as long as they dare to believe. A Roman centurion came to ask Jesus to heal his servant. Andrew whispered to Jesus, "Teacher, he is a Gentile." Jesus turned and said to the disciples, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. The mustard seed does not ask if the hand that sows it belongs to a Jew or a Roman. It only needs sincere soil to sprout." 9. Faith is the antidote to overanalysis. When faced with a mountain, human instinct is to analyze, calculate, and measure. We measure the mountain's height, estimate our own strength, and then conclude it is impossible. Faith transcends rational calculation. It does not deny the difficulty, but it believes in a solution beyond ordinary logic. The disciples could not heal the demon-possessed boy. Later they asked Jesus privately, "Why couldn't we do it?" Jesus answered, "Because you tried to use your own wisdom to fight a power you did not understand. You analyzed the sickness instead of believing in the healer." Sometimes, to move a mountain, the first thing to do is to stop measuring it and start praying. 10. A miracle is not a violation of natural law, but a manifestation of a higher law. To us, moving a mountain is extraordinary, but to God, it is as natural as breathing. Faith allows us to participate in God's higher order, where His laws operate. A miracle is not God breaking His laws for us, but Him inviting us into the kingdom where those laws have always existed. As the sun set on Mount Tabor, Jesus said to His disciples, who were marveling at the scenery, "You see the sun setting and rising as a law. You see a seed sown in the ground, sprouting as a law. So I tell you, there is an even greater law. Where there is faith, there the power of my Father will reign." Moving a mountain is not magic. It is the necessary operation of the law of the kingdom of heaven. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 11. Sometimes, faith doesn't move the mountain immediately, but gives you the strength to climb it. Not every prayer is answered with an immediate miracle. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is not the mountain's disappearance, but the transformation within our own souls. God may not take away the burden, but He will give you shoulders strong enough to carry it, and feet with the strength of a deer to overcome the steep slopes. Andrew, one of the apostles, looked at the rugged mountain path ahead and sighed. "Teacher, we prayed for this journey to be easy, but the rocks are still here." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Andrew, you wished for the path to become a plain, but sometimes my Father does not level the road. Instead, He gives your feet the strength to climb. The miracle is not just the path disappearing. The miracle is also you realizing you can conquer it." 12. Faith sprouts best in silence. Amidst the noisy world and the voices of doubt, the mustard seed of faith needs silence to take root. just as a seed needs the darkness of the earth before reaching for the light. Faith needs quiet moments in prayer to listen to God's voice, instead of the screams of fear. Mary Magdalene sat at the Lord's feet, while her sister Martha was busy with many things. Martha complained, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Jesus gently replied, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better. You are trying to move the mountain with your own strength while your sister is in silence, cultivating the mustard seed of faith so my Father can move it for her." 13. Faith is entrustment, not control. We often confuse faith with trying to control the outcome, forcing God to act according to our will. But true faith is an act of letting go. It is sowing the seed in the ground and trusting the gardener's process, not digging it up every day to see if it has sprouted roots. A farmer came to ask Jesus, "Teacher, I have sown the seeds, I have prayed, but I am still so worried I cannot sleep. Every day I go to the field to check." Jesus asked him, "When you sow a seed in the ground, is it you who does the work or the earth?" The farmer replied, "The earth." Jesus said, "Then faith is doing your part, and then having the courage to let God do his. Go and sleep in peace, farmer." 14. Other people's mountains are also opportunities for your faith. Faith is not just for your own difficulties. When you use your faith to pray for and support a brother or sister facing a trial, your mustard seed is also watered and grows. Faith resonates and strengthens in community. James and John saw a blind beggar sitting by the roadside and were about to pass him by. But Jesus stopped. He turned to them and asked, "This mountain of blindness, is it his or yours?" The two apostles were surprised. Jesus explained, "His pain is an opportunity for your faith to be demonstrated. Speak to the mountain in his life, and you will see how great the power of my Father is." 15. Faith and gratitude are two sides of the same coin. Gratitude is faith looking back, acknowledging what God has done. Faith is gratitude looking forward, trusting in what God will do. Cultivating gratitude for small things creates fertile ground for the mustard seed of faith to move great mountains. At a meal with only a few loaves and fishes, the apostles looked worriedly at the crowd. They said, "Teacher, how far will this go?" But Jesus, instead of complaining about the lack, looked up to heaven and gave thanks to the Father. He told the apostles, "Do not start with worry about what you don't have. Start with gratitude for what you do have, however small. Gratitude will turn 5 loaves into a feast for 5,000. 16. Faith sees the solution, while reason sees only the problem. Reason analyzes the mountain, measures its size, calculates the risks, and often concludes it is impossible. Faith does not ignore the mountain, but it looks through the mountain to see the hand of God. It is the ability to focus on the problem solver instead of focusing on the problem itself. When Lazarus died, Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Her words were full of reason and obvious truth. Jesus replied, "That is what your eyes see, Martha. But faith does not ask, 'What if?' Faith asks, 'What now?' Though the mountain of death seems to have won, I am the resurrection and the life." Do you believe this? 17. Every mountain moved strengthens the foundation of your faith. Experience is the teacher of faith. Every time you witness God's power at work, even in the smallest thing, your mustard seed of faith grows a new root. Remember the times God has intervened. They will be a treasure for you to face future mountains. After Jesus calmed the storm, the apostles were still afraid. Jesus asked them, "Have you forgotten the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves? Forgotten the paralytic who walked? Every mountain that my Father has moved for you should have become a stone in building the fortress of faith in your hearts. Do not let them slip away like water through your fingers." 18. Faith is not closing your eyes to reality, but opening another pair of eyes to see God's reality. Faith is not blind denial. It does not say, "The mountain is not there." It says, "The mountain is there, but my God is bigger." It is the ability to perceive two realities at once and to choose to believe in the more eternal and powerful reality. Philip looked out at the fields, barren from drought, and said, "Teacher, I only see cracked earth and death." Jesus replied, "Your eyes see what has passed, Philip. Use the eyes of faith. It does not deny that the ground is dry, but it looks to the sky and sees the clouds that my Father is about to bring. It hears the sound of rain before the first drop touches the ground. That is seeing his reality." 19. Persistence is the breath of faith. A seed does not become a tree overnight. It needs time. So does faith. There are mountains that require persistent prayer, a faith that does not give up. Persistence is not mechanically repeating a prayer, but living each day as if you believe the prayer has already been answered. A widow kept bothering an unjust judge to grant her justice. Jesus told this story to his disciples and said, "See, even a judge who fears neither God nor man must act because of her persistence. How much more will your Father in heaven listen to those who cry out to him day and night? Your persistence is the act of speaking to the mountain every day until it must move." 20. Faith transforms its possessor, even before it transforms the circumstances. The ultimate purpose of facing the mountain is not just to remove it. The greater purpose is for the process to shape you, making you more patient, more courageous, and more dependent on God. Often, the greatest change is not on the outside, but on the inside. Nathanael, who was initially skeptical of Jesus, said after following him for a time, "Teacher, I still have many mountains in my life that have not been moved." Jesus smiled, "But have you not seen that the biggest mountain has begun to shift? It is the mountain of pride and prejudice in your heart, Nathanael. Sometimes my Father leaves the external mountains in place so that you can see more clearly the internal mountains being leveled." 21. Faith is a conscious choice, not a natural feeling. Feelings rise and fall like the waves of the sea. If faith is based on feelings, it will never be stable. Faith is a decision of the will. It is the decision to believe in God's promise, even when all feelings and circumstances scream the opposite. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." He showed the apostles the ultimate lesson of faith. He did not feel like facing the cross, but he chose to trust in the Father's plan. That choice moved the mountain of sin for all humanity. 22. True faith is always accompanied by acts of love. A faith that can move mountains but lacks love is just empty power. Love is the purpose and the measure of faith. Faith works most effectively when it is motivated by compassion for others, not by personal ambition. A Pharisee asked Jesus, "Teacher, how can my faith be pleasing to God?" Jesus told him the parable of the Good Samaritan. Afterwards, he asked, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" He taught that faith is not shown by how loudly you pray, but by whether you are willing to stoop down and bind the wounds of your brother. 23. Faith is rest in the storm. Faith does not promise a life without storms, but it promises the presence of God in the midst of the storm. It is the ability to find inner peace when the world outside is in chaos, because you know who is in control of the ship. When the storm arose on the Sea of Galilee, the apostles panicked and woke Jesus. "Teacher, we're going to drown." But he was sleeping peacefully. When he awoke, he not only rebuked the wind, but also their lack of faith. He asked, "I am on the boat with you. Why are you afraid?" Faith is not about dispelling the storm, but about knowing the captain is with you. 24. Faith is the seed of hope. Hope is the expectation of something good in the future. Faith is the foundation for that expectation. Faith says, "Because God is good and powerful, I have reason to hope." The mustard seed of faith, when sown, will grow into the tree of hope, and that tree will bear the fruit of miracles. A father with a very sick child came to Jesus, saying through his tears, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Jesus saw in that desperate plea a mustard seed of faith trying to sprout. He replied, "Because you dared to hope in a time of hopelessness, your son will be healed." Faith, however small, ignited the flame of hope and brought healing. 25. Faith frees us from the prison of the past. Many people are shackled by their past mistakes, failures, and hurts. These become mountains that prevent them from moving forward. Faith in God's forgiveness and renewing power has the strength to say to the mountain of the past, "Move back," and open up a new path. The woman caught in adultery was brought before Jesus. Her past was a mountain of sin about to crush her. But Jesus said to the crowd, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." When everyone had left, he said to her, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." His words moved the mountain of sin and gave her a future. 26. Faith is an adventure, not a formula. There is no mathematical formula for faith. A plus B does not always equal C. It is a living and surprising relationship with God. It requires a willingness to step into uncertain places, trusting in God's guidance more than in a pre-drawn map. When Jesus called Matthew a tax collector, he said just one simple sentence, "Follow me." He did not give Matthew a 5-year plan or a job description. He just gave an invitation to an adventure. Matthew's faith was shown in his daring to get up, leaving behind all the security of money to embark on an unknown journey with Jesus. 27. Faith grows when it is shared. Keeping faith to yourself is like keeping a candle in a bucket. Its light will fade. But when you share your faith story, when you testify to what God has done, that flame not only burns brighter within you, but also illuminates others. After healing the demon-possessed man in the region of the Gerasenes, the man wanted to follow Jesus. But Jesus told him, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you." He knew that sharing his story would strengthen the man's own faith and sow new mustard seeds in the hearts of those who listened. 28. Faith helps us see value in what the world despises. The world honors strength, wealth, and appearance. But faith, like the mustard seed, finds strength in humility, potential in smallness, and value in what is considered weak. It gives us the eyes of God, who chooses the lowly things of this world to do great things. Jesus brought a child among the apostles who were arguing about who was the greatest. He said, "Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." He taught them that true faith is not in power or status, but in the simple and humble trust of a child. He moved their mountain of pride with the image of a child. 29. Faith in the resurrection is the ultimate faith that can move the greatest mountain, death. All other mountains, sickness, poverty, fear, are small hills compared to the mountain of death. The Christian faith is anchored in the promise of the resurrection. This belief not only gives us hope for the afterlife, but also gives us the courage to live without fear in this life. Before the tomb of Lazarus, Jesus wept. He shared in human sorrow. But then he commanded, "Take away the stone." That stone was a symbol of finality, of despair. By giving the command and calling Lazarus out of the tomb, he proved that faith in him has power even over death, the final mountain. 30. Faith is a gift to be received and used. Ultimately, faith is a gift from God, but it is a gift that needs to be opened and used. It doesn't work automatically. God gives us the mustard seed, but we are the ones who must take the action of speaking to the mountain. He respects our freedom and invites us to participate in his work. In the parable of the talents, the servant who received 1 talent and buried it was rebuked. He had received the gift, potential, but did not use it, the act of faith. Jesus taught, "Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them." The same is true of faith. If you do not use the mustard seed of faith you have, you will lose its potential. Have the courage to use that gift, and you will see the impossible become reality. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 31. The strongest faith is not when we feel powerful, but when we dare to admit our weakness. An empty vessel can be filled. A clear plot of land can be sown. When we admit our powerlessness before the mountain, we are creating a sacred space for God's power to flood in. Acknowledged weakness is the gateway that invites at his strength. Barnabas, a potter, angrily threw a lump of clay on the table. "Teacher, my hands are trembling. I can't even shape a decent pot." Jesus came to his side and said gently, "Barnabas, do not fight your trembling. Place your trembling hands within the steady hands of my Father." A perfect pot made by a surrendered, trembling hand is more glorious than 1,000 pots made by a steady, prideful hand. 32. Faith is not the elimination of all doubt, but acting in spite of doubt. Doubt is a part of the human condition, just as darkness is a part of the night. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to walk even when the shadows of uncertainty loom. One step in the fog is worth more than 1,000 words in the sunlight. The Apostle Andrew confessed, "Teacher, sometimes my heart is full of questions and doubts. I'm afraid my faith isn't real enough." Jesus pointed to a man rowing a boat against the current. Andrew, look, he is still rowing, even though the current keeps pushing his boat back. Doubt is the current, and faith is the act of rowing. You don't need to stop the current, you just need to keep rowing. 33. Faith sees opportunity in adversity. Where reason sees a wall, faith sees a door. Where the world sees an end, faith sees a new beginning. Adversity is not the end of your story. It is an opportunity for God to write a new and more glorious chapter. A flood had washed away the home of a family near the Jordan River. The husband lamented, "We've lost everything." Jesus came to them, pointed to the rich silt the flood had left behind, and said, "You have not lost everything. You have lost an old house, but my Father has just given you the most fertile land to build a new home and reap a more abundant harvest. The mountain of floodwater has moved, and it has left behind a valley of new beginnings." 34. Faith is demonstrated more in ordinary things than in extraordinary events. Moving a mountain is a grand image, but the strength to move it is forged in the small acts of faith every day: a quiet prayer, an unseen act of kindness, a decision to forgive, a choice of honesty. It is these small threads that weave the cable of faith strong enough to pull a mountain. A woman asked Jesus, "What must I do to have great faith?" Jesus replied, "What did you do this morning?" She answered, "I just prepared a meal for my family." Jesus asked further, "Did you prepare it with love and gratitude?" She nodded. Jesus smiled. "Then you have already practiced faith. Don't look for a mountain far away. First, move the small pebbles of irritation and selfishness in your daily tasks." 35. Faith is trusting the gardener, even when you don't understand his intentions. Sometimes the gardener prunes green branches so the tree can bear more fruit. To the branch, it is a painful loss. Faith is trusting that even in the painful prunings of life, God is acting for our highest good. Simon the Zealot, a man full of patriotism, asked Jesus, "Why don't you move the mountain of Roman oppression?" Jesus replied, "Simon, you want me to uproot a thorn bush, but my Father is using the very shadow of that bush to protect a more fragile sapling growing beneath it. There are mountains my Father allows to exist for a time, not because he is powerless, but because he is doing a greater work behind it." 36. Faith is a legacy. It is passed down and continued. Your faith is not just for you. It is a torch lit to light the way for the next generation. When you live a life of faith, you are building a mountain of witness for your descendants to look to for strength and encouragement. Lois and Eunice brought their grandson Timothy to meet Jesus. He placed his hands on the boy and said to the women, "The mustard seed of faith that you have sown in this child's heart will grow into a great tree that shelters many." Never underestimate the prayers you pray and the stories you tell your children and grandchildren. You are moving the mountains of unbelief in the future. 37. Faith and wisdom must go hand in hand. Faith is not blind recklessness. Speaking to the mountain does not mean jumping off a cliff and expecting God to catch you. Faith is accompanied by the wisdom to discern which mountains God wants you to move and which ones he wants you to wisely find a way around. The disciples asked Jesus, "When should we confront and when should we avoid?" Jesus replied, "When a snake comes, a wise person does not try to talk to it. They will move away. When a wall blocks the path, a person of faith does not ram their head into it. They will pray for the Father to show them the hidden door. Faith gives you strength, and wisdom tells you where to apply that strength. 38. Faith is the faculty of a sanctified imagination. Faith is daring to paint a picture based on God's promise, even when the canvas of reality is still blank or stained. It is the ability to envision a bountiful harvest in a barren field, to imagine healing while still in pain. This imagination, when guided by faith, becomes the blueprint for a miracle. Jesus asked a blind man, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied, "Lord, I want to see." Jesus said, "Before your physical eyes open, see with the eyes of your soul. Imagine the faces of those you love. Imagine the color of the sky. Your faith has already painted that world. Now, open your eyes and see." 39. Faith in God's providence frees us from the burden of anxiety. Anxiety is a mountain we build ourselves from the pebbles of what if. Faith is the act of leveling that mountain by trusting that God, who cares for every sparrow and every lily of the field, cares for us even more. Jesus said to the crowd, "Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? Look, your Father knows what you need. Speak to your mountain of anxiety. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Peace will come, not because the problem disappears, but because you know you are in safe hands. 40. True faith seeks glory for God, not for oneself. If our act of moving a mountain is only to prove ourselves or to seek the admiration of others, then it is just magic, not faith. True faith always has a higher purpose, that through it the Father's name may be glorified and His kingdom may come. After healing 10 lepers, only one returned to thank Jesus. Jesus asked His disciples, "Where are the other 9? They received the miracle but missed the encounter. They wanted the mountain of their disease moved so they could return to their old lives. This man, however, wanted the mountain moved so he could begin a new life of worshipping God. Whose faith is greater? 41. Faith is a battle, not a vacation. The teaching about the mustard seed was given right after the disciples failed to cast out a demon. This shows that faith operates in a world with opposition. There will be forces, both internal and external, that want to hinder your faith. Therefore, faith requires vigilance, resilience, and spiritual warfare. A Roman soldier asked Jesus, "Is your faith like discipline in the army?" Jesus replied, "It is similar in one respect. A soldier does not expect the battle to be easy, but he trusts his commander. He does not fight alone, but with his comrades. Your faith is the same. Trust in the supreme commander, stand shoulder to shoulder with your brethren, and never abandon your post." 42. Faith is a state of active rest. It may sound contradictory, but faith is the act of resting. It is the cessation of all self-effort, ceasing to try to solve things on your own, and actively resting in the power and faithfulness of God. It is the deep peace that comes from knowing that the battle is not yours but God's. While Jesus' boat was about to be swamped by a storm, the disciples panicked, but he was asleep. His sleep was not carelessness, but an expression of absolute faith. When they woke him, he not only calmed the storm outside, but also taught them about calming the storm inside. He asked, "Why not rest in me?" 43. Faith sees eternal value in temporary actions. A cup of cold water given, a kind word spoken, an act of forgiveness. In the eyes of the world, these may be small, fleeting things, but faith sees them with God's eyes and recognizes that actions done with love have eternal value and are recorded in heaven. When a sinful woman anointed Jesus' feet with expensive perfume, the disciples criticized the waste. But Jesus said, "She has done a beautiful thing to me. What she has done will be told in memory of her." He taught that an act of faith, though considered wasteful by the world, is the wisest investment in the kingdom of heaven. 44. Faith is the bridge between promise and reality. God has given us countless promises in the Bible, but those promises remain on the other side of the river until we build a bridge of faith to cross over and receive them. Every act of trust is a stone laid to build that bridge. Jesus told his disciples, "My Father has promised you peace, but that peace does not automatically fall like rain. It is on the other side of anxiety. You must use your faith, taking the first steps on the water like Peter, to go and receive it." 45. Faith in Jesus is faith in the very Word of God. Faith is not belief in a vague concept of divinity. Christian faith is placing complete trust in a specific person, Jesus Christ, believing that He is the Word of God, the full revelation of the Father's love and power. When Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" they gave various opinions. But when he asked, "But what about you? Who do you say I am?" Peter confessed, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." That confession is the rock of faith that can move every mountain. 46. Faith is agreeing with God's view of you. The world and you yourself may label you failure, sinner, incompetent, unworthy. These labels are mountains. Faith is the courageous act of tearing off those labels and agreeing with how God sees you, loved, forgiven, created for a high purpose. When Jesus called Peter an ordinary fisherman, he said, "I will make you fishers of men." He did not see a fickle, hot-tempered Peter, but the chief apostle of the church. Peter's faith began when he dared to believe in Jesus' vision of him more than his own. 47. Faith does not exempt us from suffering, but it gives meaning to suffering. Faith is not a ticket to escape all the pains of life, but it is a lens that helps us see meaning and purpose in those sufferings. It turns bitter trials into refining furnaces for the soul, and turns scars into symbols of grace. Standing at the foot of the cross, Mother Mary and the Apostle John experienced a mountain of utmost sorrow. Their faith did not take the cross away, but faith gave them the strength to stand firm, to believe that this death was not the end. Faith helped them see through the brutality of Friday to the glory of Sunday morning. 48. Faith is obedience even without fully understanding the reason. Abraham is called the father of faith because he obeyed God to leave his homeland without knowing where he was going. He obeyed to offer his promised son. True faith is shown through obedience, trusting the one who gives the command more than one's own understanding of it. Jesus told the disciples to let down the nets on the right side of the boat after a long night of catching nothing. With his fisherman's experience, Peter knew it was illogical, but he said, "Because you say so, I will let down the nets." That obedience, despite reason, led to a miraculous catch of fish, a miracle that moved the mountain of failure and emptiness. 49. Faith trusts in God's sovereignty, even in the chaos of the world. Looking at the world, we see war, injustice, natural disasters. These are huge mountains of chaos. Faith is not denying that chaos, but a deep conviction that behind and above it all, God is still in control, and He is guiding history to a good conclusion according to His plan. The disciples worriedly asked Jesus about the end times, about wars and persecutions. Jesus told them, "When you hear of these things, do not be frightened." This advice is a call to faith, to believe that no matter how the world shakes, God's throne remains firm, and not a hair on your head will fall without His permission. 50. Faith is a call to come home. Ultimately, every journey of faith, every effort to move mountains, is directed toward one ultimate goal: to return home to the Father. The mustard seed of faith is not just a tool to improve life on earth. It is the seed of the kingdom of heaven sown in our hearts, a reminder that we are made for a greater reality, an eternal homeland. In the parable of the prodigal son, the son had to face the mountain of shame and hunger. But it was then that a mustard seed of faith in his father's mercy sprouted. He said, "I will set out and go back to my father." That decision moved the mountain of separation, and at the end of the road, the Father's arms were open wide. Every miracle of faith is a foreshadowing of the final miracle, being welcomed into the loving embrace of the Father in heaven. 51. Faith is not a bonsai tree to be displayed indoors, but a wild seed capable of growing through rock. We often want a neat, controllable faith that fits our lifestyle. But true faith is breakthrough and wild. It is not afraid to grow in the most difficult places, breaking through the old foundations of habits and prejudices to build something entirely new and alive. Jesus saw a man tending a potted plant on a windowsill, while in the yard there was a cracked stone slab. He asked, "Which plant is stronger?" The man pointed to his potted plant. Jesus replied, "The plant in the pot is beautiful according to your will, but it will never grow larger than the pot. My Father, however, loves the seeds that dare to sprout from the cracks in that stone. Your faith is the same. Do not confine it in the pot of comfort. Let it grow among the hard rocks of life." 52. Faith is trusting the conductor, even when the music has painful low notes. A great symphony needs both joyful high notes and deep, somber low notes. Life is the same. Faith is not just hoping for happy tunes, but trusting that even in the sorrowful and confusing movements of the music, the divine conductor is still directing everything to create a harmonious and meaningful masterpiece. A musician complained to the Lord, "The music of my life is full of low notes." Jesus replied, "You are only hearing a few notes, but I hear the whole symphony. Do you know that it is these low notes that will make the high notes that follow more brilliant and glorious? Do not judge the music before it is finished. Just trust the conductor." 53. God's silence is not absence, but an invitation to a deeper faith. Sometimes we pray and receive only silence. The mountain remains towering there. This silence can be the greatest test of faith, but it is not abandonment. It is an invitation for us to move from a faith based on feelings and evidence to a mature faith based on absolute trust in His nature and love. The mother of James and John came to ask Jesus for her 2 sons to sit on His right and left. Jesus was silent and did not immediately grant the request. Later, He explained to the disciples, "My Father is silent to prayers that come from ambition, but He always hears the whisper of a broken heart." His silence is a test. Do you love the gifts, or do you love the giver? 54. Faith is the ability to see the harvest in a single seed. Anyone can see a field of golden ripe rice. But it takes faith to look at a tiny grain of rice and see a whole future harvest. Faith is the ability to look at the potential God has placed, instead of just the small and limited reality before our eyes. Jesus gave Mary, Martha's sister, a grain of wheat and asked, "What do you see?" Mary replied, "A grain of wheat, teacher." Jesus said, "Yes, but I see hundreds of loaves of bread. I see the hungry being fed. I see life being nourished. When you learn to see everything, everyone, and yourself that way, you are beginning to see with the eyes of faith." 55. Faith frees us from the tyranny of what other people think. What will people think is one of the biggest mountains preventing us from living out our true calling. Faith is the act of placing the value of God's approval above human approval. It gives us the courage to walk our own path, even if that path is different and lonely. When Jesus ate with tax collectors and sinners, the Pharisees murmured. The disciples felt uncomfortable. Jesus told them, "If you build your house on the whispers of others, it will collapse as soon as the wind changes. But if you build your house on the rock of my Father's truth, it will stand firm. Say to the mountain of what people think, I have only one judge, and he calls me his beloved child." 56. Faith is the anchor that holds the present, the torch that illuminates the past, and the compass that points to the future. Faith reshapes our relationship with time. It allows us to look back on the past through the lens of grace, finding lessons instead of regrets. It anchors us in the present, giving peace amidst the storms. And it directs us toward the future with hope, believing that God has gone before us and prepared the way. An elderly man confided in Jesus, "I regret the past and fear the future." Jesus replied, "Faith gives you a torch. Hold it up to your past, and you will not see mistakes, but forgiveness. Faith also gives you a compass. You don't need to see the whole ocean. Just know that the compass needle always points to the safe harbor of the Father. And faith is an anchor. Drop it right here, and you will find yourself steady. 57. Faith is a creative act, not passive acceptance. Speaking to the mountain is a creative act. It is refusing to accept negative reality as destiny and beginning to proclaim a new reality based on the power of God. A person of faith is not just an observer of the world. They are a co-laborer with God to transform the world. A weaver had lost her inspiration. Her tapestry was all a dull gray. Jesus came and gave her a vibrant red thread. He said, "This tapestry is your life. You cannot change the gray threads of sorrow that have already been woven. But with faith, you can choose to weave in new threads of hope and love. A single red thread is enough to change the entire tapestry." 58. Faith is not possessing the answers, but living in peace with the questions. A mature faith does not claim to know everything. It humbly acknowledges human limitations and trusts in God's infinite wisdom. It allows us to live with mysteries, with unanswered questions, without losing peace or trust. Nicodemus, a Jewish leader, came to Jesus at night full of questions. Jesus did not give him a list of answers, but instead spoke of the wind. The wind blows wherever it pleases. He taught that faith is not about mapping the wind's course, but about raising the sails to catch that wind, trusting that it will take us where we need to go. 59. Faith is recognizing the value of the unseen. The world only believes in what it can see and hear, but faith is the conviction in unseen realities. Love, forgiveness, loyalty, God's promises. It teaches us that the most important things in life are often those that cannot be measured. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This is not praise for blind credulity. It is a blessing for those who can sense the presence of God's love in a world full of hatred, see hope in the midst of despair, and believe in the light even when their eyes see only darkness. 60. Faith is a refusal of bitterness. When treated unjustly or hurt, the natural reaction is to become bitter. Bitterness is a mountain that slowly grows, poisoning the soul. Faith is a conscious act of rebellion against that bitterness. It is the decision to choose forgiveness and to believe that God will turn evil into good. Joseph, who was sold by his brothers, later told them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." This statement is the pinnacle of faith. It does not deny the pain, but it refuses to let the pain define reality. It moves the mountain of revenge and builds a bridge of reconciliation. 61. Faith is a dialogue, not a monologue. Prayer is not just presenting a list of requests to God. It is a dialogue. Speaking to the mountain is only one part. The other, more important part is listening for God's guidance, comfort, and sometimes correction. After a day of teaching, Jesus withdrew to a quiet place. Peter found him and said, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus did not rush back. He needed time to converse with the Father. He taught his disciples that before speaking to any mountain, they must spend time listening to the voice of the One who has power over all mountains. 62. True faith always produces compassion. If someone claims to have mountain-moving faith but is indifferent to the suffering of others, there is something wrong with that faith. When we truly connect with the heart of God, our hearts will also melt at the needs of humanity. Faith softens the heart. It does not harden it. Seeing the crowds, harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd, Jesus had compassion on them. That compassion was the driving force behind the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves. He taught that before moving the physical mountain of hunger, we must be moved by the mountain of suffering in their souls. 63. Faith is investing in a kingdom that cannot be shaken. This world and everything in it, money, fame, power, are kingdoms that can be shaken and fall. Faith is the wise act of investing our time, talents, and resources in the kingdom of heaven, an eternal kingdom that nothing can destroy. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." Every act of love, every silent sacrifice, every sincere prayer is a coin deposited in the bank of heaven. That is how to speak to the mountain of insecurity and fleetingness. 64. Faith is a shield, not a weapon to attack others. St. Paul later called faith the shield to extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one. Its primary function is protection, not to attack, judge, or impose on others. A healthy faith creates security for the soul, not arrogance to look down on others. When the Samaritans did not welcome Jesus, James and John were angry. "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" Jesus rebuked them. He taught that faith is not to be used as a weapon to punish those who do not believe. It is a fire to warm, not to burn. 65. The heaviest mountain is not made of rock, but of the bitterness of an unforgiving heart. We can pray to be healed from sickness or to escape poverty, yet secretly nurture a mountain of resentment in our hearts. Forgiveness is a miracle of faith. It is believing that God's grace is greater than our pain, and that the freedom of the soul is more precious than the satisfaction of revenge. Peter asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." He taught that forgiveness is not a mathematical act, but a way of life. Every time we refuse to forgive, we are shouldering another boulder. Every time we decide to forgive, we are speaking to that mountain, "Get away from me." 66. Faith is the courage to start over. Failure is an unavoidable part of life. The mountain of failure and shame can paralyze us. Faith is the strength to get up after falling, to dust ourselves off, and to believe that each new day is a blank page on which God's grace can write a new story. After denying Jesus 3 times, Peter faced the biggest mountain of failure in his life. But after the resurrection, Jesus sought him out by the seashore. He did not bring up his failure. Instead, he asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" and gave him a new mission: "Feed my sheep." He taught Peter and us that faith has the power to turn failure into a launching pad. 67. Faith is stepping out of the boat of safety. Most of us want to live in our familiar boat, where everything is safe and predictable. But miracles often only happen when we dare to obey God, step out of the boat, and walk on the water of uncertainty. A mustard seed cannot grow if it stays in the bag. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." He was the only one who dared to leave the boat. Though he later became afraid and sank, at least he experienced the miracle. Jesus teaches that it is better to stumble while trying to do something great for him than to sit safely in mediocrity. 68. Faith is not a feeling, it is a commitment. Feelings come and go. If we only trust God when we feel excited, our faith will be very fragile. True faith is a commitment, a vow of the soul that says, "No matter what happens, no matter how I feel, I will still trust and follow you." This commitment is a solid foundation that can withstand any storm. In the discourse on the bread of life, many disciples left Jesus because his teaching was too hard. Jesus turned to the 12 and asked, "You do not want to leave too, do you?" Peter answered for them, not with emotion, but with a commitment. "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." 69. Faith is using what you have instead of complaining about what you lack. Before a hungry crowd of 5,000, the disciples saw only lack. "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." But Jesus started with what they had. He took it, gave thanks, and the miracle happened. Faith does not focus on lack, but on the potential of what God has given, however small. Jesus teaches us, don't look at your empty granary. Look at the seed in your hand. Don't look at the towering mountain. Look at the mustard seed of faith that my Father has given. Start there. Offer what you have, and my Father will multiply it. 70. Faith, ultimately, is a love story. Why would someone dare to believe in the unseen, dare to face mountains? In the end, it is not because of a doctrine or a philosophy, but because of a relationship. Faith is the response to the love of a God who loved us first. We trust Him because we know He loves us. Love is the engine and the ultimate purpose of faith. John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, wrote more about love than anyone else. He rested his head on Jesus' chest at the Last Supper. His faith came not only from what he heard, but from feeling the heartbeat of God. And he understood that moving a mountain is not a test of strength, but an intimate act between a loving father and a trusting child. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 71. Faith is not just a personal act. It creates a spiritual atmosphere. A community that believes together can move mountains that an individual would struggle to budge. The atmosphere of fellowship, encouragement, and corporate prayer is the most fertile ground for mustard seeds of faith to grow. Conversely, an environment full of skepticism and criticism can cause even the strongest seeds to wither. When Jesus returned to his hometown of Nazareth, he did not perform many miracles there. He later explained to his disciples, "In Capernaum, I only needed one person's mustard seed, but here, I have to break through a whole mountain of collective unbelief to reach a single soul. Build communities where faith is the air you breathe, not a stumbling block." 72. Faith is the courage to live in the not yet. We live in the tension between the already and the not yet. The kingdom of God is at hand, but not yet fully manifest. We have been saved, but are still in the process of being sanctified. Faith is the ability to live peacefully and joyfully in this imperfection, trusting in the promise of a complete tomorrow while faithfully working today. The disciples asked Jesus, "When will your kingdom be fully established?" Jesus replied, "A farmer sows seed in the spring, and he lives all summer with faith in the harvest, even though he holds no grain in his hand. You are the same. Live in the joy of the coming harvest, and work hard in the sunlight of today." Faith is the bridge between promise and reality. 73. Faith is not the abolition of reason, but placing reason at the service of a higher truth. Faith does not ask us to stop thinking. It invites us to think more deeply. Reason can help us understand the material world, but it has its limits. Faith allows our reason to soar higher, to explore spiritual realities that it alone cannot touch. Reason is the feet. Faith is the wings. A learned scholar came to debate with Jesus. After a while, he had to admit, "My reasoning leads me to a wall." Jesus smiled. "Indeed, your reason has done its job well by bringing you to the foot of the mountain. Now, you need faith to climb to the top and see the view on the other side. Do not leave your feet behind, but allow me to give you wings." 74. Faith is the act of choosing your memories. Every day, we can choose to remember our failures, hurts, and rejections. Or we can choose to remember the times God was faithful, the small miracles, the times He rescued us. Choosing to remember and recount the stories of God's goodness is an act of faith, fortifying the soul to face future challenges. Before crossing the Jordan River, Joshua commanded the people to take 12 stones from the middle of the river as a memorial. Jesus, when teaching, also often recalled the great works God had done for the people of Israel. He taught, "When you face a new mountain, turn back and look at the memorial stones in your life. They will remind you that the one who moved mountains in the past is the same one who will move the mountain before you today. 75. Faith is an act of trusting the process, even when you don't see immediate results. A sculptor chisels a block of marble. With the first few strikes, one sees no form, only flying chips. But the sculptor continues because he foresees the statue hidden within the stone. Faith is trusting that God is also sculpting our lives, and that even the broken pieces of suffering are part of the process of creating a masterpiece. A young disciple lamented, "I have prayed and tried, but I don't see myself getting any better." Jesus pointed to an old olive tree and said, "Do you see this tree growing? No, but you know that it is." Growth in the kingdom of heaven is often silent. Do not be discouraged by the lack of daily results. Just trust the gardener. He knows what he is doing. 76. Faith is refusing to be defined by your limitations. The world and our own selves often say, "I am just. I can't. I'm not enough." These are the bars of an invisible prison. Faith is the key to unlock those doors. It declares that our true identity is not in what we lack, but in the Almighty One to whom we belong. When the Lord called Gideon, he was threshing wheat in a winepress out of fear. The angel of the Lord greeted him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon must have been very surprised. He only saw himself as a coward. Jesus later taught his disciples, "Don't say, 'I only have 5 loaves.' Say, 'I have 5 loaves and an almighty God.'" The difference is there. 77. Faith is embracing a joy that is not dependent on circumstances. The world seeks happiness, an emotion that depends on external happenings. The kingdom of heaven brings joy, an internal state that stems from a relationship with God and is unshaken by circumstances. Faith is the channel through which this supernatural joy flows into the soul, even in the midst of hardship. St. Paul later wrote from prison, "Rejoice in the Lord always." He learned this lesson from Jesus. Jesus was able to be joyful even when facing the cross, because his joy came not from comfort, but from fulfilling the Father's will. He taught that there is a mountain of sorrow that can be moved by a mustard seed of heavenly joy. 78. Faith is not a bucket to draw water, but the realization that the well is already overflowing. We often think of faith as an effort, a merit to try to earn God's favor. But this is a misunderstanding. God's grace is like a well that is already full and overflowing. Faith is not the bucket to draw it, but simply the act of realizing that truth, kneeling down and drinking. It is a response, not an initiation. At Jacob's well, the Samaritan woman asked Jesus, "Where can you get this living water?" She was still thinking in terms of effort. Jesus answered, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." He taught that faith is to stop trying to save ourselves and to start receiving the free gift that is being offered. 79. Faith is a rebellion against mediocrity. The devil doesn't just tempt us to do evil. Sometimes he just tempts us to live a mediocre, complacent life, without dreams, without daring to do anything great for God. Faith is a declaration of war on mediocrity. It is the desire to live a meaningful, impactful life, a life worth living. Jesus rebuked the church of Laodicea not because they were bad, but because they were lukewarm. He said, "I wish you were either cold or hot." He challenges them and us to break out of the comfort zone of mediocrity. Speaking to the mountain also means speaking to the mountain of complacency and self-satisfaction. Move, for I was made for greater things. 80. Faith is acknowledging God's sovereignty even over prayers that are not answered as we wish. What happens when we pray with all our faith, but the mountain does not move? A mature faith will not collapse. It will bow before the wisdom and sovereignty of God, trusting that He has a better plan, even when we don't understand. Faith may not always change the circumstances, but it can always change us. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, "Let this cup pass from me." It was the most sincere prayer. But the mountain of the cross was not moved, and then He prayed the prayer of ultimate faith, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." He taught us that the highest faith is not forcing God to do our will, but entrusting our will into God's hands. 81. Faith is saying yes to God, and therefore having the strength to say no to 1,000 other things. When you say yes to a calling, you must say no to other paths. When you say yes to honesty, you must say no to deceit. Faith in God gives us a clear compass. It simplifies our lives, helping us to focus on what truly matters and to courageously refuse what leads us astray. Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters." This teaching is not just about money, it is about loyalty. Every day we face many masters demanding our attention and worship: fame, power, comfort, fear. Faith is saying a definitive yes to the one true master, and that makes all other choices clear. 82. Faith is building on rock, not on sand. Sand is easy to build on, quick, and doesn't require much effort. Rock is difficult, time-consuming, and requires digging deep. True faith is choosing to build your life on the solid foundation of God's word and obedience, rather than on the easy foundations of emotions, current trends, or human wisdom. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus concluded with the parable of the two builders. He warned that the storm will surely come. The difference is not in the beauty of the house, but in its foundation. Speaking to the mountain becomes meaningless if our own house of faith is built on the sand of disobedience. 83. Faith is recognizing that everything is grace. A person of true faith will not be arrogant. Even if they move a mountain, they know the strength did not come from them. They realize that even the initial mustard seed of faith was a gift. The breath they breathe, their ability to pray, all is grace. This attitude creates a humble and grateful heart, which is the best soil for greater miracles. The Pharisee in the temple prayed, listing his good deeds. The tax collector could only beat his breast and say, "God have mercy on me, a sinner." Jesus said the tax collector went home justified. Why? Because he realized he had nothing to boast about. His faith started from zero, from the recognition that everything depends on God's mercy. 84. Faith is living as if the kingdom of God is already here. Faith is not just waiting for a better future, it is bringing the values of that future into the present. Living as if forgiveness, justice, peace, and love are the operative laws. This act in itself has transformative power, pulling heaven closer to earth. Jesus taught us to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." This is not just a request, but a commitment. Every time we forgive an enemy, help the poor, speak the truth, we are acting as citizens of the kingdom of heaven and are helping to move the mountain of separation between heaven and earth. 85. Faith is a quiet act of rebellion against the empires of the world. The empires of the world, whether ancient Rome or the modern systems of power, materialism, and fear, operate on display, force, and control. Faith in an invisible kingdom, ruled by a humble king on a cross, is a radical act of subversion. It challenges every assumption of the world. When Matthew the tax collector left his table to follow Jesus, it was a political act. He abandoned his service to the Roman Empire to serve another kingdom. Jesus said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." He was implying a higher loyalty, an ultimate ownership. Faith is declaring that ownership over our lives. 86. Faith is not a suit of iron armor, but living skin. Iron armor is hard, heavy, and unfeeling. Many people think of faith as a rigid set of rules to protect them. But true faith is like living skin. It is sensitive, it feels the pain of others, it can be wounded, but it also has the ability to heal and grow. It connects us to the world rather than isolating us from it. Jesus touched the leper, a forbidden act. He wept at Lazarus's tomb. His faith was not a divine detachment. It was a full and emotional engagement. He teaches us that a faith without compassion is just a lifeless corpse. 87. Faith is believing in spring in the midst of the harshest winter. When everything around is cold, bare, and dead, that is when faith is tested the most. The winter of the soul, of circumstances, is inevitable. Faith is the ability to see through the snow and ice to the life quietly waiting underneath, the certainty that after winter, spring will surely come. Between Friday and Sunday morning was a silent Saturday, a winter of despair for the disciples. All hope seemed to be buried in the tomb. But in that silence, the greatest miracle was being prepared. Faith is the ability to wait through Saturday, believing that Sunday is coming. 88. Faith is giving others your own mustard seed. When you have experienced the power of faith, however small, you have a responsibility. It is to give others hope, to encourage them to trust. Sometimes your words can be the mustard seed. Someone else needs to start moving their mountain. Andrew was not the most prominent in faith, but he had a special gift. He always brought people to Jesus. He brought his brother Peter. He brought the boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He teaches us that sometimes the greatest act of faith is not moving a mountain yourself, but connecting someone facing their mountain with the only one who can move it. 89. Faith is discovering that you yourself are the mountain that needs to be moved. We often think the mountain is outside, sickness, hardship, other people. But often the biggest, most stubborn mountain is our own proud ego, our self-righteousness, our self-will, and our stubbornness. True faith begins when we pray, "Lord, please move me." The Apostle Paul, before meeting Jesus, was a mountain of religious pride, confident in his own righteousness. On the road to Damascus, the Lord moved that mountain with a blinding light. Paul was struck blind so that he could truly see. The greatest miracle was not Paul moving mountains, but Paul himself being moved from his old path. 90. Faith, ultimately, is a return to the simplicity of a child. After all the analysis, philosophy, and theology, faith returns to its starting point. The simple and complete trust of a child in their father. A child does not need to understand everything. They just need to know that they are loved and safe in their father's arms. Jesus placed a child in the midst of the disciples and said, "Unless you change and become like this child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. This is the final and also the first lesson of faith. To move a mountain, sometimes we don't need a complex faith, but a faith simple enough to just take the Father's hand and believe that, with Him, all things are possible. 91. The mustard seed of faith is not something we create. It is a seed sown by God Himself into the soil of our souls when we long for Him. We cannot try to believe by our own strength. The very longing for God, however faint, is already a sign that He is acting first. Faith is the response to His call. He is the initiator, the sower of the seed. Our part is to prepare the soil of our soul, making it soft with humility and desire, so that the seed can sprout. A woman was trying to teach her young son how to plant a seed in hard, dry ground. The child struggled, unable to push the seed down. Seeing this, the gentle mother came over, placed her hand over her son's small hand, and together they gently pressed the seed into the earth. Jesus, seeing this, said to His disciples, "Your faith is the same. You desire to believe, and the very Spirit of my Father will place His hand on yours, helping you to sow that seed in your heart. You never have to start on your own." 92. The purpose of the mustard seed of faith growing is not for us to admire our own shadow, but to become a large tree for other weary souls to find shelter. Jesus' teaching does not stop at moving mountains. In another parable, He says the mustard seed grows into a tree for the birds of the air to come and nest. This is the social and communal purpose of faith. A mature faith no longer lives for itself. It becomes a refuge, a source of protection, a peaceful shade for those who are tired, afraid, and lost in life. Under a large fig tree, many people were resting from the midday sun. John said to Jesus, "Teacher, it is so peaceful under the shade of this tree." Jesus replied, "Your faith must become like this. When it is a mustard seed, it needs care. But when it has grown by the grace of the Father, it no longer lives for itself. It stretches out its branches, inviting the wounded, the weak, to come and find rest. A faith that does not become a refuge for others is still just a stunted tree." 93. All mountains, whether named sickness, poverty, or fear, have one true name in common: separation. Ultimately, all human suffering stems from some form of separation. Sickness is separation from health. Conflict is separation from peace. Sin is separation from God. Faith is the power that reconnects what has been separated. It is the bridge across the chasm, re-establishing communion with God, with others, and with oneself. In the temple, Jesus looked at the huge curtain separating the holy place from the most holy place. He said to His disciples, "Man has erected so many mountains to separate himself from my Father. This curtain is a mountain of cloth. Pride is a mountain in the heart. But I have come to move the greatest mountain, which is the separation caused by sin." Faith in me is the act of stepping through those crumbling walls to run into the Father's arms. 94. Faith may be the language of miracles, but the mother tongue of the kingdom of heaven is love. St. Paul wrote, "If I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." This is the ultimate truth. Faith is a power, but love is the purpose. Faith is the vehicle, but love is the driver who decides the direction. A mountain-moving faith that is not motivated by love and does not lead to acts of love is just an empty and dangerous power. The disciples returned joyfully after their mission. recounting how they had cast out demons in Jesus' name. Jesus listened, then he asked, "But did you love the people you healed? Did you have compassion for them?" Because moving the mountain of demons out of a person is a good thing. But if you do not fill that empty space with the Father's love, 7 other demons more wicked will return. Never forget, faith works most effectively through love. 95. Finally, after all the philosophies, the mustard seed of faith is simply the gaze of a trusting soul toward the Lord, and the whisper, "I trust you." We have gone through dozens of layers of meaning, from psychological and theological to communal. But in the end, faith returns to its most primal essence, a personal relationship. It is not a formula to control God, nor is it a complex philosophical system. It is the simple trust of a child looking up to their father, entrusting everything into his hands. Peter, now an old man, sat by a fire with the risen Lord, a scene reminiscent of both his denial and his forgiveness. He no longer asked lofty questions. He just looked quietly at the Lord and said gently, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you, and I trust you." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. "Peter, that is all my Father needs. That is the mustard seed. That is the rock. That is everything." Dear friends, so we have come to the end of a very special journey. The journey of exploring 95 profound philosophies inspired by Jesus' teaching on the mustard seed of faith. Church Audio sincerely thanks you for your companionship, listening, and reflection throughout this series. More than all the analysis and philosophy, we hope that what remains most deeply with each of us is a call back to simplicity, a return to a sincere trust like that of a child, believing in a God who is a Father, who is loving, powerful, and always faithful. Because in the end, faith is not about how much we know, but about how much we dare to entrust and rely on Him. And today, right now, Church Audio invites you to courageously look at your own mountain. It may be a worry, an illness, a broken relationship, or an invisible burden in your soul that has weighed you down for a long time. Instead of analyzing or fearing, try to practice your faith as small as a mustard seed. Offer that mountain to God and whisper to Him just one simple sentence. "Lord, I trust you." If this series has touched you, please do not hesitate to click, like, and share this video with your relatives and friends, those who might also need a word of encouragement to face their own mountains. And if this is your first time on our channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss other meaningful programs that help nourish the soul and strengthen faith from Church Audio. Every interaction from you is a priceless encouragement for us to continue producing better content. Once again, thank you sincerely. May the peace and grace of God be with you always. Church Audio, where the soul finds peace. Greetings, and see you again.